Two vehicles, more than 3 decades apart, two moments that stopped the world for completely different reasons. One of them exploded in front of millions of people, live on national TV. The other vanished into total silence, crushed by the invisible pressure of the deep ocean. But despite that brutal difference, there's something connecting these two stories, something you don't see in the footage, something no camera could capture. But that was already there long before the tragedy. A decision. The decision to move forward, even when there were clear warning signs that something was wrong. This is where engineering meets political and economic pressure, where science runs into ego.
In today's video,
Today, you're going to understand why the Challenger disaster and the Titan implosion weren't just isolated accidents. They were events built over time. They were the result of accumulated choices. And maybe the most unsettling part is realizing that these kinds of choices aren't as rare as we'd like to believe. If all the warning signs were there, why didn't anyone stop it? The Challenger case. On the night of January 27th, 1986, while most of the United States was asleep, a group of engineers was still awake. This wasn't a normal work night. This wasn't a routine review.
It was a desperate attempt to prevent something much worse. The problem had a simple name, but massive consequences. O-rings. Small rubber sealing rings. Discrete components, almost invisible to anyone looking from the outside, but absolutely critical. They were responsible for sealing the rocket joints, preventing superheated gases from escaping during launch. If they didn't work perfectly, the entire system became vulnerable. And there was one critical factor in that equation: temperature. On the morning of the launch, temperatures dropped to around -8 degrees Celsius, about 17 degrees Fahrenheit. And under those conditions, that's extreme cold. Cold enough to compromise the elasticity of the rubber. Cold enough to prevent the O-rings from sealing properly. This wasn't a guess. This wasn't an overreaction. It was based on real data. Previous tests had already shown signs of erosion, small failures, concerning leaks, and most importantly, a direct correlation between low temperatures and loss of performance. The engineers knew exactly what that meant, and they did what any responsible professional would do. They asked to delay the launch. They insisted. They argued. They presented charts, analysis, failure history. They weren't trying to avoid work. They weren't trying to delay a schedule for comfort. They were trying to stop a tragedy before it happened. But the answer they got was simple. No. On board, there was a teacher, a symbolic figure, someone chosen to represent the future of education, to inspire students across the country. The event would be broadcast live to millions of viewers. This wasn't just a space launch. It was a national spectacle, a symbol of progress. At that point, deciding whether to delay the Challenger launch wasn't just technical anymore. It was political. And that changes everything.
The critical moment. Under growing pressure, the management of the company responsible for the rockets made a decision that would become historic. They asked the engineers, the same ones raising the concerns, to leave the room. Without the most critical technical voices present, the tone of the discussion changed. No new data, no new analysis, and yet, the recommendation was reversed. The launch was approved. The decision was made. Launch day. The next morning, the scene was almost surreal. The rocket was covered in ice. The structure shimmered in the freezing cold. Still, everything was considered acceptable. The countdown continued. The engines ignited, and Challenger lifted off. For 73 seconds, everything seemed fine.
Until a failure occurred, exactly where it had been predicted. The O-rings didn't seal properly. Superheated gases escaped, and within seconds, the rocket's structure was destroyed. The world watched in shock. The most important point, the most disturbing part of this story, isn't the failure itself. It's the fact that it was known. This wasn't unexpected. This wasn't unpredictable. It was a risk that had been identified, discussed, and still accepted. If everyone knew, why couldn't anyone stop it? The Titan submersible. Decades later, a new project started getting attention. Different, innovative, ambitious. This was the Titan, a submersible designed to take tourists to one of the most famous sites in history, the wreck of the Titanic. The idea sounded fascinating. Explore the deep ocean and offer a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But there was a key detail. Titan didn't follow traditional certification standards. It was an experimental project, operating in a commercial context. And just like before, warnings started to appear. Experts raised concerns about the structure, about the materials used, about its ability to withstand extreme deep-sea pressure. And once again, those warnings weren't fully taken seriously. Pressure changes shape, but doesn't disappear. In Challenger's case, the pressure was institutional. Tight schedules, public expectations, political interference. With Titan, the pressure was different. Business-driven, rapid innovation, cutting bureaucracy, the urge to lead an emerging market, to monetize before fully validating. Different types of pressure, same result. Moving forward, despite uncertainty and even highly probable structural failure. In both cases, the warning signs were there. They weren't hidden, they weren't vague, they were clearly documented. The risks didn't appear overnight, they were built over time. Small failures started to feel normal. Recurring problems stopped triggering alarm. And that has a name: normalization of risk. When a mistake repeats and nothing happens immediately, it stops feeling dangerous. Until the inevitable happens. And when it does, it's already too late. System versus no system. One failed despite the system. The other failed because of the lack of it. The joystick, a symbol. And then there's a detail. Small at first glance, but loaded with meaning. The Titan's control system, a joystick, similar to a video game controller. From a technical standpoint, that's not necessarily a problem. But symbolically, it represents something bigger. A sense of extreme simplification, informality, a shortcut. As if an incredibly complex system could be treated with the same logic as something trivial. That detail becomes the perfect symbol of a mindset. The mindset of moving fast, even when the situation demands caution. The real breaking point happens earlier. It happens the moment someone recognizes the risk and still chooses to move forward. How much risk is acceptable when stopping becomes too expensive? And maybe the most uncomfortable question isn't about the past, it's about the present. How many decisions like this are being made right now? How many warnings are being ignored at this exact moment? And how many of these stories will end the same way before we actually learn the lesson?
Want to hear more random facts that might change your life or not? Follow us here and on our other socials. Everything's down below in the video description. Also, drop a like, leave a comment telling us what you thought about the video and what you want to see next. And don't forget to share this with someone you think will enjoy it too.